Hey everybody, what's up? It's Chase. Welcome to another episode of the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on CreativeLive. You know this show. This is where I sit down with the most amazing people and I do everything I can to unpack their brains with the goal of helping you live your dreams in career, in hobby, and in life. My guest today is a two-time appearance on the show. This is her second time. She hailed back from originally in 2012, I think the second year that the show was in existence. One of my favorite episodes to date. She is a cellist, a performer, an arts activist, a composer, so many things. I can't wait for you to enjoy this conversation with my guest, the one and only Zoë Keating in the house. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
How many years has it been?
Too many.
Too many. We were just laughing when you showed up the door. It's like, oh my gosh, big hug. It's been 5 years. We just figured out it's been more like 7 or almost 8.
Yeah, I think that's a theme. I'm out on the road right now on tour, doing my own shows, and also with this artist Imogen Heap.
Oh, amazing.
And she and I first toured together in 2007, and she's been telling the audience, oh, Zoe and I, we first performed together 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago. Like it gets more and more. It's a theme.
It's a theme.
I've lost the ability to keep track of time.
Time goes fast.
Yeah.
One of the cool things is that it was actually, you performed probably within like 5 square feet of where we're sitting right now. And on that show, for the folks who haven't seen it, you should go check it out. You did a private concert for us.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
This is a great place to be in.
Isn't it?
I have a fondness for converted warehouse spaces, so.
That's exactly what it is. And for those folks who are listening and can't see, or you probably, if those of you who can just see, it's just like bricks and windows, but it's a really beautiful 2-story brick warehouse in the middle of downtown, one of the few that are left, because everything else is, that's Amazon and Facebook and Google, and we're surrounded now. But it's a super special space, and the performance that you did here now some 8 years ago.
However many years ago.
It's seriously crazy. But so actually, let's go. You're touring right now, the new album. Talk about it.
Yeah, we're touring, and neither Imogen nor I are sort of, in a way, we've kind of removed ourselves from album cycles. We're just kind of on tour because it's a good time for us to tour. And I did release an EP last year called Snowmelt.
Yes.
And I made the decision that rather than wait to put together a whole collection of songs, the world has changed, and I could just do 4 and just release it, and I could release them whenever I'm ready. And so I thought, these 4 fit together, I'm gonna release those, and that was last summer. So now I'm working on another batch of songs. I have a film score to write over the summer, so that's probably the thing I'll do right after the tour.
Wow.
We're at the end of the tour now, so we went to Miami, New York, and Chicago, Seattle tonight, and then tomorrow, San Francisco. So.
Amazing.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. You nailed it. This is the new album, Snowmelt. Well, I think, as I reflected on our original conversation, which came up, by the way, because I just stumbled on your music on the internet, was like, it just totally rocked my world. And very few people do I reach out cold. It's usually a friend or someone that I know, or just someone who has I've known for a long time and or inspired me. And this was like, heard your music.
Wow.
And reached out almost immediately, cold turkey. I think it was either to your agent or to your
I think it was
Zoe at Gmail.
I think it was just my website.
Yeah, I think it really was like, hey, I have this podcast, and whatever, that was 8 years ago before podcasts and stuff. And it was a live show too. We did it entirely live then.
Yeah.
But that's how much I was just like stone cold inspired. And one of the things that I learned about you between reaching out, you saying yes, and sitting down together was how you have built your career. And I was very inspired by it. And that was early CreativeLive days. Early for me, advocating for artists to be able to make a living in a life doing what they love. And a lot of tools have come around since
yeah.
then. A lot of opportunity to democratize our ability to make a living. A lot of that stuff has
Yeah.
changed. So I think of you as like an OG. You've been advocating for artists direct and not having big music labels and all that stuff for a long time. So help me walk through your thinking.
Well, you know, it's interesting, again, thinking, since we seem to have a theme of time passing, and
Yeah.
and one thing is that whatever is happening right now always feels like how it's always been. You're like, oh yeah, I'm doing this now, and I tend to take for granted, you know, the steps along the way.
Yeah.
And in the world of music, like nowadays, it's a valid strategy to sort of forge your own path and to not have a record label and to release your music directly and just try to get on Spotify playlists or. But at the time when I first started, it was considered radical that you might do that deliberately.
Yeah.
Like
that was your only choice. That's what you did before.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I did it because I felt like you either had to be part of a big machine or you do it on your own. And back then, it was like if you do it on your own, it was considered a failure.
Yeah.
Like
you only went there because you couldn't play the game.
Yeah. Whereas I could see, like, no, actually, you would go that way. I chose to go that way because of control.
Yeah.
Because I could do the art that I wanted to do, if only I set the rules. If you let other people make the rules for you, you can't necessarily do the art you want. And so those were, you know, yes, I was also rejected by the machine, but it allowed me this freedom to do what I wanted. And so when somebody said, well, this music is interesting, but I think it needs vocals. And I was like, no.
You don't want me to sing.
I don't want, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I was going for. I was like, you know, I really think that this thing I'm making is something that is worthwhile and I want to keep doing it. And so I did it myself. And so meanwhile, here we are in 2019. And that's like an acceptable way. Like you can just come up with an idea and have a vision and you can make your video and you can put it on YouTube and there you go.
That was a huge part of our conversation however many years ago, how that was, it was really just emerging. Ironically, the same thing was this show was I turned down an MTV show and a Bravo show.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and just said, you know what, I'm just gonna start doing this stuff by myself. There was some downfall, there were some technological hurdles then that don't exist today. Like if I had a really popular show and it was also on video, I would get the bill.
Yes.
For how many people would download.
That's a huge thing.
Yeah, and that's mostly, it's basically entirely gone away now.
I remember when I had this moment in 2006 when my music went to like #1 on iTunes and it was on NPR and I was hosting all my audio files on my web server.
Yeah. Melted it, right?
Yeah, and I got like a bill from the host. It was like, bandwidth costs. So I was like, oh my goodness. And then I started looking for ways to host it elsewhere.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to have to do that anymore. It's like inversely proportional. You do really good, you get stuck with the bill.
Yeah.
Like that's backwards.
Yeah, and now there's like, again, there's so many little places where you can put stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's, like, at the risk of getting a little bit too nerdy or tactical, but I think there's a lot of people who are a lot of musicians and people who want to make audio who, like, how do you think about your own distribution? Of course, you make, as you said very clearly, you wanted to be in control of your own music. You wanted to be able to play the music that you wanted, where you wanted, when you wanted to go on tour, not go on tour, do an album, not do an album. Talk to me about your strategy. Like, how do you think about releasing stuff and what platforms do you use? And like, do you do all your own recording? Do you just put stuff out every day? Like, how do you think about it?
Yeah. I would say that, first of all, like my process has changed a lot because I'm a mother. And so my time is a lot less than it was. And it still takes me the same amount of time to creative work.
Yeah.
It's just that I have less time. So I'll make the work, and still make it kind of the same way. It's me and a cello and some microphones. And
do you have a studio? Do you do it in your living room? Do you record somewhere else?
I still do it in-house in my own home. About a year and a half ago, I moved to Vermont. And so I'm doing it in a spare bedroom in my house. But before that, I had a little tiny recording studio I had built in my backyard. So I just like record I have had a little bit, I've done some TV work since last time I saw you. So I started adding some other instruments in there, but it's still the same idea. And then for my last EP last year, I thought, gosh, how do you release music now? Because what format should it be?
Yeah. Where? Is it on a podcast? Is it on is it via Spotify? Is that your main release? Like, so do tell.
Yeah, and I thought a lot about this actually. Like, okay, CDs feel kind of anachronistic. Like, does your computer have a CD drive?
No.
No, you have to like plug in separately if you want it. Should it thumb drive? Like, I don't know. Even my computer doesn't have that USB stick anymore. You need a dongle. Right. Downloads, is it streaming? And so I decided to. I think we're still in this era of format confusion. Like, we're not totally comfortable with streaming and everything in the cloud, but how do you have music physically? So I just decided to make the music and make it in high quality and then release it in a myriad of ways. So I sell them as like high quality downloads that are better than CD quality. I sell it as a CD, you can do a download card at a show, you can do it streaming. It's kind of, I think, I'm trying to pay attention to where people are listening. I just want it to be where they're going to find it. I see a lot of artists focusing entirely on Spotify or a particular streaming service, and I've always felt like that's a mistake to only focus on one thing. I never put all my eggs in one basket, and it's become clear to me that I think people listen to music in different ways in different situations. So yes, I put it there. But I also still try to get across that I am an individual and there's no one between you and I. And that if you care about me as a creator, being able to continue creating, please come to me directly and pay what you want for it. Pay what you think it's worth. And that's still where I make the majority of my, music sale revenue from people who come to my site, which I use something called Bandcamp. And they pay $10, they pay $100, they pay $1. It's like pay what you want. It's essentially a large donation box, and there's going to be little fish and there's whales, right? And that still works really well for me. And I think that for artists like me who are kind of outside the mainstream, that's developing your core audience and reaching them directly and releasing music to them is really good. I know other artists who use Patreon or other kind of crowdfunding things for that. I made a decision not to do that for reasons we could go into later if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I'm all about it. I definitely want to talk. Jack Conte, the founder and CEO of Patreon's been on the platform. So I want to talk about that for a second. But if we can just dig down a little bit, like, is there a methodology behind your releasing music? Is it just, do you hit a cadence and again, we're talking about this in terms of you and your music,
right.
But if you're sitting at home listening or watching, this is true with almost all art, right? You used to have to be on a cadence. If you were a painter, you had to paint like a show every year at a gallery. So we're talking about you and your music, but if you're me, you're like going like, oh wow, this is how I can think about it. So how do you think about it?
I don't worry about necessarily when's the right time to release. It's like right now I have music, it's either ready or it's not ready.
Yeah.
And when it's ready, I just put it out without fuss. And
it's incredible. Though.
And I'm not necessarily, I don't believe in the idea that you have to have it be an event.
Yeah.
I think that's from a previous era. Like you're having a record release and you're going to have a marketing budget around it and it's going to make a splash and you're going to try to sell so many units in that period of time so that you can chart.
Yeah.
I've seen for me that I think if something's good, if people like it, it doesn't age. And so if I release something last year or tomorrow, it's fresh to whoever's hearing it at that moment.
I've probably listened to End of the Trees 10,000 times.
Wow, that's amazing.
and it feels, and I will play it for someone who isn't familiar with their work, and they're like, oh my gosh, is this out yet? And I'm like, it's been out for 8 years.
Yeah.
And so just a small compliment there, like your work really is timeless.
Oh, well, thank you.
But I think how you think about it is really intriguing. That it's like good stuff or stuff is good, then it will probably be timeless, and you think of it as such.
And that gets into the idea of release schedules, or you have to release every year. And I think there are some artists who feel like it's important to them, and maybe it is important to them, that they have to release on a regular basis, like you. And there are things about the technology dictating that. Like, for example, there's a lot of discussion that Spotify kind of favors algorithmically artists who release regularly.
Yeah,
like if you do it, the more you release, the more popular you can become, and it also favors short pieces. So, that's this trend towards songs are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and it's until they're essentially just a chorus.
Right. Ta-da!
Yeah. And I try really hard to not let that influence me. Like, there's something I want to do and create, and I try to have it not be format specific. So, again, going back to my last release, it was ready. I felt like it was time. I put it out.
Simple as
that's
that.
It. That's the extent of my strategy.
Let's go. Okay, put a pin in the strategy. I got it. But let's go back to the why. You mentioned casually as a part of another sentence that, I was rejected by the machine. You called it the machine. You talked about it a little bit. You just hinted at rejection. So was there a world and a time where you wait a minute, I'm this cellist and I want to go be on fill in the blank label.
Right.
And you tried to meet some people and make it happen, and you're like, oh, shucks, or walk me through.
Yeah, initially, I had this sort of tech career in my 20s, and I played the cello in rock bands and had played the cello in numerous kinds of bands. I had my own projects. At one point, I had 5 different projects I was involved in, and I loved it because I had my day job, and then every evening was spent rehearsing and making music. And so when I had squirreled away making my little thing and it was ready, I had this little collection of songs, and I knew some people in the music industry and decided to do what you did, which was you send it off with a note or a letter and hope you could get an intro so somebody could look at it or listen to it, and then you just hope to get some interest. And I was hoping to get a record deal. I was hoping that somebody would be interested in it. And I think I got some response, which is saying something. I think
up,
mostly
right?
you probably don't hear anything,
it's the abyss,
right?
Mostly,
I got some response. But the 2 responses that I got were, one of them was, it's very interesting, we don't think there's any market for it. And the other one was, this is really interesting, let's get you a singer. Or can you sing? And that was it, really. So I was I thought, okay, do I keep trying? Do I keep trying to get this? Or do I just say, put that aside and just release it? And at that moment, iTunes just came alive. Mm-hmm. And it's great we're having this conversation because this week was the announcement that iTunes is now going to go away. But this was 2004 and iTunes was new. And they had just opened up the platform to independent artists. Before, you had to be on a record label.
Yeah, you had to be a label, and the label had to have a relationship with Apple. And
and it was this thing called CD Baby.
Yep.
Yeah, CD Baby allowed independent artists to get their content up on iTunes. And I was like, I'm going to do that. So, it was November 2004, I think I put that little EP up there. And that was really the beginning for me.
Have you continued to, you talked to just a moment ago about you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So how do you think about it when you say you're releasing it?
Yeah.
What do you walk me through what you actually do, because I'm fascinated by it.
Well, so I make the music and I get it mastered, and then I send it to all the all the services. I am lucky enough that in some cases I am my own distributor. I do work with a distributor in order to be on Spotify.
Got it.
But I have a direct relationship with Apple and a direct relationship with some other services, so I can just upload it.
Got it.
And there you go.
And do you promote that, or do you rely on those platforms to promote your work? Or do you promote through touring? And
I would say that's an interesting question. I used to think that I did performances in order to sell albums. It's like the show is the best advertisement, you know?
Yeah.
And I still think that to some degree. It's just that I can't tour as much as I used to.
Got it.
But
so is the music then an advertisement for your show because it's more rare and you are
yeah,
able
they
to
kind of go back
sell
and,
out and
they,
fill
they
bigger
go back
art?
and forth, you know,
Yeah.
like some people only know me as a recording artist. Some people discover the music now. I wish that I had like an information graph of like all how people discover it. You know what I mean?
It'd be fascinating.
Because right now
this
it's
is
just,
the information architect in you.
yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
That was her career that she
Yeah,
was talking about
right.
earlier when she had a day job.
Yeah, because I always do a meet and greet after every concert, and one thing I like about that is that the concerts it's important for me to feel connected, even
Yeah.
more than ever was before. Like nowadays, that sense of connection that I get from the audience, that I feel connected to them, is really important to me. And so after the concert, I meet some of the audience, and it's tiring. You know, I've just had like this intense cathartic pour out my heart thing, and then
Yeah.
I'm also going to go and talk to
Yeah.
the audience.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah, but it's important, and I do it for many reasons. And one of them is that I hear from people. They tell me how they just volunteer it. They usually say, "Oh, I first heard you, blah blah blah," and that's the extent of my data collection, really. That and like social media and what have you. But I love those stories, and I feel like they nurture me and inspire me to keep going, really. And so people hear it on, in a way, all the places that use my music. So there's a podcast called On Being.
Okay.
They use my music in their show. Lots of people find me there. Lots of people find me through Radiolab, who also uses my music.
Amazing.
NPR Morning Edition uses my music, you know, at the top of some stories.
Wow.
And you know, they use this two pieces in particular that is sort of a sound of some of the stories in Morning Edition, and they have my name in big letters on the bottom, you know, Zoë Keating.
That's cool.
So that one, there's a TV show called Elementary, which is, it's on CBS, and it's about Sherlock Holmes. It's a modern day Sherlock Holmes, and Lucy Liu plays Watson. And they use my music as the thinking music of the Sherlock character. And so many people after the show are like, "Oh, you know, I heard your music on Sherlock, and went to, you know, Sherlock, I went to look you up," or Elementary. You know?
Yeah. So you're putting it, and is this are you actively doing this, or
No,
it's
that's
more
all-
pop culture?
That's all been organic, like
Yeah.
all those inclusions. That's
For those folks who think that organic just happens overnight, though, how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this a long time. 2004, 2005.
Okay.
However, that organic is, you know, I think for an artist, you sort of create this ubiquity. Not too ubiquitous, but like you want to be in the
Like
right.
surround sound. You want to be everywhere.
Yeah, you want to be in the right places.
Yeah.
Like those are all special kinds of things that I love being associated with. I feel like it's synergistic in a way.
Yeah.
Like my music is giving their show a particular sound, and then, you know, it reflects on me, and then people find me, and so it does kind of work itself out.
Yeah. I just love how intentional you are. I remember reaching out to you. I had what was one of the most profound experiences of my life. I encountered a super pod of more than, 10,000 dolphin. And I don't know, you may not remember this, but I reached out and said,
I remember this.
and said, like, hey, it was one of the most profound experiences, and I want to, with this explorer friend of mine off the coast of South Africa,
Yeah.
I want to raise awareness for ocean health. It's amazing how ocean health is such
I know.
a peak, like
And
peak ocean health.
microplastics and all that stuff is, yeah.
But it was really important to me back then, and you're like, absolutely, we can, we figured something out really quickly, and you're like, this is one of the reasons that I love making music, because I love putting it in special places. I remember you saying
Yeah.
something like that, and it stuck with
Yeah.
me as, like, if you're gonna make art and you want it to be, accompany the messages, then you might as well be intentional about the messages that you want out in the world.
I do find it interesting that like the people who want to use something for something, it's nearly always something that I find really compelling.
Yeah.
And that's another thing towards managing your own world, is that it's only me representing my music. So, I'm not always that great about getting back to my email in a timely fashion. However, once we get there, there's nobody else to negotiate with.
Yeah.
It's like, so.
So how does that affect? I think there are a lot of people out there like, oh man, I need I need the agents and all the
Yeah.
the layers of insulation so I can just do my art and that's all I want to do. And I don't want to sell. I only want to create and like, and here you are saying like, I want to make the art I want to make, but also like, there's no buffer. It's like you go out in the crowd after your shows and you're hanging out with people who are just at your shows and you're negotiating. So how does that work? I think that's intimidating for some people, scary for some people. Is it scary for you? Is it hard? How do you think about
I am
it?
not good at negotiating. I will give everybody everything, you know. So that's actually something that I'm bad at. But I recognize that I'm bad at it, and I do have an agent. But the agent doesn't find me licensing stuff. He negotiates.
Got it.
So somebody writes to me and they want to put my music in something
In
now.
a television show or a movie or whatever.
And he, on the other hand, loves that part.
Yeah.
He just loves talking the money. You know, it's what he does best, and he does it in this really what I call a loving way, which makes it so that people are, you know, it's reasonable, it's not scary for them. And you know, if I decide it's something that I am interested in, that I'd like to be a part of, now I just say like, Randy, I'd like this to happen. You know, this sort of a scale of licensing fees that we do.
Do the best you can within our scale.
Within this scale of this kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And then he takes care of that. And then I have a very lovely attorney in Portland who very easily and quickly executes a license, and then it's done. But so in a way, that's like there's some things that I know I'm bad at that I've offloaded. I would say that there is a cost in personal time for all that hands-on stuff. That as you get bigger, you know, you must know this running your thing, right?
Yep.
And I have struggled, I think, to find more things that I'm not doing well because of I'm overloaded, and trying to offload those. So that's actually something I'm working on right now. Is like I want to figure out how I can take some of those things and offload them to somebody else who might do them better, so I can shine at the things I shine at.
Yeah.
But at the same time, still, it matters a lot to me that you can email me about coming here, and I can email back and say yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So,
So.
No, I think this is, you just described what I think is the sort of both the bliss and the paradox.
Right.
Like the frustration of this new era. It's not just that we have tools, we can represent ourselves and like all the upside. We want all of the upside, right? We want to be able to be precious. I want it here and not here.
Yeah.
It sound like this, not that. I want to play in this hall, not that one.
Yeah.
And you've created that for yourself. And I think there's this balance that I'm hearing in there, that as soon as you can afford it, start finding ways that you can continue to narrow the focus to the things you're good at.
Yeah.
Is that sort of over time, or how do you,
I think that over time I have, like, now I have a booking agent. So for example, it used to be that if I wanted to go on tour, I had to figure out what venues to play in, research the venues, call them up, try to get them to answer my emails, you know, or phone calls. And now I can just say, hey, I'm going on tour in Imogen Heap's band. Can you get me dates around hers? You know, put that over there.
Done.
So that's something, you know, in a way it's like we have a limited amount of time on Earth.
Yes.
Right? And I want to maximize it. And so I recognize now that I need more than help. I need more help than I have now, but it took me a while to get to even the help I have now. So
yeah.
But
but this is the trap, right? This is the irony. It's like you want.
Yeah.
I think it's probably sounds like it's about timing, like knowing when you're overloaded. People are like, I want to start out with all my agent and my people and my posse, and then you're not going to get. Yeah. You know, it's like sort of.
And there's some point like when you become. Well, I mean, I'm not an artist. I'm a professional emailer.
Yeah.
You know, like you have 200 emails to do, and that's not efficient, right? I think that there's another distinction, though, which is some people think that you need to have a posse of people working for you because that makes you look like something, and that's the wrong reason to do it.
For sure.
You know, like that you need a manager because that makes you seem bigger than you are, and there's this whole thing that artists of all kinds do to appear differently than they necessarily are, and I don't care about that.
How?
So,
is it something you've just decided never to care about?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think I've tried to be upfront about the fact that I am an independent artist, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it has its ups and downs, and there's pros and cons. It's not for everybody. yeah, I'm an independent, and that's perfectly respectable.
Well, as someone who was independent before I really knew very many other people that were independent, especially on the music side, I think, again, we can continue. This is not just about music, right? This is about like creating a living and a life doing what you love with your creativity. And it seems almost like an advantage. It's like there's this layer of authenticity that you lose as soon as you start putting cotton balls between you and your fans or your audience or whatever. And it's like, it seems like finding that sweet spot is what it's all about. Almost.
And it's always changing too. It's always shifting. Like there's times when I've been just so exhausted after a concert, and or if my son is with me and I've got a babysitter there and I need to like relieve the babysitter and I have to cut short the meet and greet or not do it, and then I feel kind of disconnected, and so it's like sometimes I think, oh, I should just cut off the meet and greet because then that would give me more time, and but then there's consequences for that, and so it's always shifting.
Sorry, keep going. I interrupted.
Oh no, I can't remember what I was going to say next.
Dang, my bad.
It was that thing. I started thinking about my son and babysitters and all this stuff, and immediately my brain went there, and I was just
is there a babysitter we're late for right now?
No.
Well, the last time you were here, your child was an infant.
Yeah, he was like a year and a half.
Yeah, and now 9, is that right?
Yeah, he had 9. His 9th birthday was 2 weeks ago.
Amazing.
Yep.
How does motherhood play into being an independent artist and touring and all these things?
Well, I'm realizing that, it is another job. And I think I have a tendency to just take things on and not necessarily realize like the time impact of things. And this tour that I'm on right now has actually been really illuminating for me, and talking about like personal growth, and you're continually trying to grow and make things better. I've had a lot of realizations on this tour.
Ooh.
And
do tell.
The last time I really toured with my son, he was very small, and he was more compact. He didn't have school. He's
physically more compact and emotionally.
He was more happy to roll into our thing. Yeah. And obviously, your listeners might be aware that my late husband developed cancer and died when my son was 4.5.
4.
And so, touring when we were a family unit was a little easier than it is now. So I decided not to bring him with me on the last 4 years of touring. I left him at home with family members.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time in a long time that I've toured with him, and he's different and has different needs. And I haven't really done a lot of childcare. I've mostly just tried to make my life work around it. I had some idea that, okay, I can be a mom, and I can also have this full-on music career, and I can also do all the advocacy that I do around copyright law and other groups that I'm involved in. And it's become so clear on this tour that that's just not true, and that childcare is a wonderful thing. Because I'll try to be quick about it, but
there's no reason to be quick. This is why it's long form.
This was sort of an experiment, and Imogen Heap asked me to come on tour with her, and I wasn't sure if I could do it. It just seemed impossible. I looked at the dates and I thought, like, I can't get my mom to look after my son for that long. Like, it's too long, but it's also too hard for me to fly back. And I was just really struggling with this and really having like a crisis about it, like thinking maybe I have to say no. Maybe this isn't part of my life anymore. Maybe I just have to say goodbye to that. Maybe I'm too old for this. And it felt like a real tragedy. And I was really, because I love touring. I love being on tour. It's grueling and it's difficult sometimes, but I love it.
Yeah.
And it really feels like part of who I am. So, she said, well, just bring him with you. You can share our nanny, because she has a 4.5-year-old. And so anyway, so there's been this, it was like, okay, we'll do a mixture. Some of it he'll stay home with my mom. Some of it he'll come with me and we'll use the nanny. So the first show comes around, and I'm just like in a tizzy about like how difficult this was. And I realized that for me to be in charge of my son for the whole day until a sound check at 4 o'clock, and then the nanny comes there, and it's an 8-hour day with our sound check, and the show's over by like just before midnight. And I was like, I am not going to make it through this. And the nanny is wonderful, but it's 2 kids, different ages. Like she has to take them both back to the hotel, and then we carry one of them back to their other rooms, and it's
tough.
Any parent is immediately pictured like the logistical challenge of all this stuff. And so I reached out to another musical friend, Amanda Palmer. Because she, I know, has a nanny, and that nanny has a network of babysitters around. And
the nanny network.
The nanny network. And I managed to get sitters in different cities.
Oh
and
my gosh.
Did this for the first time. Like, hired a babysitter to meet me at the venue and to hang out. And, you know, my son doesn't need a babysitter. He needs a hang.
Yeah.
He needs like his own personal grown-up. Who can get him dinner, get him back to the hotel. And so there was, in Boston, there was this wonderful young gentleman who came to watch my son at the venue, and he was an illustrator. And I realized that it's not just babysitting. There's like a network there's all these people out there who have something they could teach my son. And he was backstage, and they were both drawing, giving each other drawing challenges, like, okay, draw a cowboy, you know, eating an apple. Okay, now you draw a house exploding. And they were having draw-offs. They did it all evening long for the whole concert backstage. And I didn't have to worry about my son. He was having a great time. And then I was free. I could take that part of my brain that is always monitoring him, and I could actually just put it over there and go up on stage. And I had a great concert. And I was so ecstatic afterwards, because like, this is possible.
But I mean, I'm going to put words in your mouth you're not saying, but you only learned that through trying. And you're like, I tried it, this sucks. I tried it again, this sucks, this is hard. I don't like how it makes me feel.
And I was scared about it too. Like, I was scared about things that I think a lot of other mothers talk about, of like, you know, giving my motherly duties to somebody else. I feel kind of irresponsible about it, so that I can go and be applauded on stage. You know, it feels there's always a kind of a self-indulgent part of being an artist that's not all there is, but you can sort of see it sometimes that way and be like, oh, you know, am I being a good mom? Here I am on stage, and my son is with some babysitter that we only just met backstage. That could sound terrible, right?
Yeah.
But it was actually great. He was like learning something from a new person. It was a warm, loving environment. I was able to go and be myself, and then he could see me being my best self. You know, it was actually more. It was not less. It was not a compromise. It was a plus.
Isn't it fascinating that you can judge from not having been able to do that in previous worlds? You could say, oh, I wouldn't want to do that because I'm not with my son, and because of this, and I'm going to get judged here, and I'm going to judge myself, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then you can step through that fear.
Yeah.
You said, okay, Amanda knows what she's talking about, probably. I'm going to give this a shot. And then when it works, and not only does it work, but it's actually better. Yeah. It's pretty interesting to apply that to some other things in your life, right?
Probably. Yeah. I'm my own worst critic, you know, like I'm very harsh on myself about how things are going as a mom, as whether I'm composing enough, am I doing enough artistic time, am I eating right, am I exercising enough? Like, is this out of tune? Like, you know, maybe everybody's this way, but I could see how like my self-criticism there could limit me.
What have you done? What do you do? Because the imposter syndrome, the self-criticism.
Oh, imposter syndrome. I forgot about that one. Yeah.
In all those things, let's just call it our gremlins, right?
Yeah.
How do you manage your gremlins? Or do you just let them run ripshod? What's the...
I'm not sure I manage my gremlins all that well. There are times when I become aware of them, which is really good, because then, you know, like this tour, there has been things like that I've seen. I also recently got involved in this group called the American Music Licensing Coalition. And it was a group that was formed in response to the Music Modernization Act that passed last year.
Yeah.
And the Music Modernization Act created this mechanical licensing collective, which would collect mechanical royalties for artists from streaming, what have you. And that's always been something that's really hard for individuals to do.
Yeah.
Publishers and Sony and Universal, they've managed to collect their mechanicals just fine.
Yeah.
But people like me have not always. And so this group, the AMLC, was formed, and they asked me to join the board. And I had big imposter syndrome, like, I don't,
board?
I'm not qualified to do this. If they get the contract, which they had to make a pitch to the Copyright Office, and the Copyright Office is currently evaluating all the propositions and then all the proposals, and then we'll grant it to one of the groups. It felt like so big, and I felt like I don't really know enough stuff. And then as I got into it, I realized that actually I know a lot about music licensing.
Because you've been doing it for yourself for years. That's the perspective that's probably missing in that world.
I think so. And that I am an individual, and the fact that I'm an individual who's unrepresented is my strength, because I know what it's like for people who are not represented, how hard it is to do stuff.
Yeah, for real.
Right. So this is like imposter syndrome. I realize it took me a while to realize that. And so, so I've been talking about it, and there was a call just this last week with the Copyright Office.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So I was wanting to get into that a little later, but since you brought it up, part of in the introduction, I referred to you as a artist rights activist.
Yeah.
And you've been very outspoken with things like copyright and licensing. And how did you get into it? What are you currently doing, and what should we as listeners and participants in the system, is there a takeaway for us?
Well, I think I'm always interested, and have been, in individuals being able to do what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
And that's my story right there. If I want to release this music, and how do I do that? And I ended up having to do it as an individual, using tools that were available to try to release it. And so when it comes to things like copyright and artist advocacy, it's that if you look at, if you go to Congress and you walk the halls, and there's legislators, the other people walking the halls are lobbyists. The lobbyists are there, and they are paid for by organizations and companies to represent the interests of those organizations and companies. And I just realized that individuals don't always have that.
Yeah.
Who's out there representing?
Who's lobbying for you?
For me,
right now?
as an individual. Yeah. And I got invited, once I started talking about the DIY world, and I would be on panels, and one thing led to another, and I started speaking about this, that, and the other. I would always be an individual, and I realized I might be the only person in the room who wasn't paid to be there.
Wow.
And that's why you're not hearing from a lot of individuals sometimes, like representing individuals, because it's expensive.
Yep.
And so I can, and I feel like it's important, to just get the message out that you don't always have to have companies do everything for you. And actually, if we don't watch out,
companies will do everything.
Companies will do everything for you. And that sometimes your interests can align, sometimes you need YouTube to host your video because you can't host it yourself, right?
Yep.
But you and YouTube do not have the same interests. 100%.
Yeah.
And it's just good to always remember that. And I think sometimes people forget that, not every company out there has your specific interests at heart, and you have to stick up for them. And so that's what I see as my role, is to just stick up for the individual and to talk about the rights of the individual and say, like, hey, you do have a lot of agency, and this is what might work better for you, and just to keep the discussion going. And in the realm of services, whether it's for video or for music or for art, or I think lots and lots and lots of little competing services is great. I get nervous when things start to consolidate. And that's something that's happened since last time I saw you. You know, there's been a lot of consolidation, and that there's, we talk about music streaming, it's Spotify. We talk about video platforms, it's YouTube, and we talk about Facebook. And there's some social and political consequences that have come from those services.
Clearly.
So Anyway, so I think it's a big discussion about like the power and the agency of an individual. So.
Well, I think it's fascinating that you lived it, and now you're advocate. You've always been a champion, but you lived it, and that's part of what made you an amazing advocate. As you saw the pitfalls and the. I also advocate. I've been to the Copyright Office, given talks to them, sat on panels, and
tried to use their website.
That's rough. And you see that they're lovely folks, largely hamstrung by budget and lobbyists in Congress and legislators and all that kind of stuff. Do you feel like that is work that is? Do you see your work more as in government, or are you taking what you see in government and helping the DIY artists? Like yourself.
Well, I think there's. I think I probably don't take this job as serious as I could. This could be a full-time job, but there's an educational role, in that you asked me earlier how I got started, and there was a key moment when I started getting involved in the discussion about music streaming. And that was because this company called Spotify was already in Europe, and they were launching in the US, and they have it's a killer app, right? It's amazing. It's like, it's all the music at your fingertips, you can get it anywhere. It's a great app. What I took offense at was their marketing campaign as they were launching in the US, which was never pay for music again.
Wow.
That was their first.
That
was their first tagline, and so that was their marketing campaign. And then they were talking about, hey, the music industry is broken. Piracy has devastated the income of artists. We are here to save the music industry. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't think I need saving.
I'm doing just fine.
And I realized that my story, and the story of artists like me, independent artists who appeal directly to their fans, who are like fan supported, was not represented in that story. And that here was a company that was creating the story of the music industry because that was helping their product launch, And so I felt like that's when I started saying, like, hey, let me show you how I make a living. And that was when I started publishing my earnings, which I think I did the year I met you. I started publishing my annual earnings as though I was a company of this is how much money I make from streaming, this is how much I make from downloads, this is how much I make from physical sales, live concerts, royalties, ASCAP. I started doing that.
Is this also the information architect in you?
Yeah, I think so. Going back to data,
visualization,
a little bit of data. And I really believe that if you don't know how to measure something, how can you talk about it? How can you talk about whether it's being hurt or helped if you're not measuring it, right?
Seems quite obvious.
So I thought that in this world where people are saying, okay, music industry is dead, people can't make a living, streaming is going to save it. And I said, the music industry is very diverse. And let me describe to you my little corner of it and the corner that other artists I know are in. And I had some idea that if I started releasing my data this way, I thought other artists would do it too. In retrospect, maybe I should have created a platform for them to do that would be slightly more anonymous, because I realized that there's a lot of shame.
For sure, shame.
For artists.
And,
if people don't think they're big enough, they think they're not good. Those are not connected.
Right.
The amount of money that you're making is not connected to how good you are.
And also it's not really you, it's your art.
Good.
Art,
that's what I mean. Right?
Your art has, it is a, it's, first of all, creativity is a habit. You get in the habit of creating, the output is art. Art gets better as you get, more practiced. And even then, it's not a reflection on who you are.
Yes, it's not. Yeah, it's not.
I mean, in a way it is, because you're creating it, but that if you make $1 million a year versus $50,000 a year, how do you advocate, in this case, to the people who are listening and watching right now, to separate those things? How did you do it? Because in the beginning you were making
nothing,
right?
I think when it comes down to like the money aspect of music, I didn't think in the beginning that I would be able to make a living at it. So when I started making a living, it was always, this is awesome.
Yeah,
You know?
even if it's a small living,
Yeah.
this is awesome.
So that was awesome. But there was the other thing that, you know, as I started counting on it and needing that money, it still doesn't feel like it's my self-worth is connected to that paycheck. I've made all different incomes throughout my life. And it's going to go up, it's going to go down, you know. It doesn't feel connected to who I am.
Is that something you actively program, or is that just a natural state to you?
I think that's just natural to me. And also that maybe going back to from when I was an information architect and a data analyst type, I think it's really interesting how something is found or is listened to, or so that aspect of like, oh, I had 2.1 million streams and I earned, you know, X amount of dollars, which is so much per stream. That was just interesting to me. Like, it's sort of, I find that kind of cool and interesting. So I have maybe a slight, it's not personal.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a,
it's
a business, not business lens, or just an interest lens. Like, clearly it's a passion or a
it's
hobby.
like, it's almost, that part of it seems like, not a game, but it's cool, it's not meaningful. It doesn't, like, whether I had 2 million streams or 4 million streams or 500 streams, it doesn't mean anything to, it's not connected to my song that I care so much about, you know, like.
Let's go back to, I want to go back to two things, and it's related to this thread that we're pushing on now. Let's talk about promotion, because we started talking about, you're kind of like the,
right.
You know, does the music you play live promote your streams or album sales or direct? You said you don't use Patreon or any artist direct sort of built-in software.
Yeah.
How do you think about the equation of promotion and monetization?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that world for you, the artist.
I think, for better and for worse, I'm not an active promoter. I haven't hired the publicity company. You know, I haven't ever actively sought out articles. It's all been somebody chooses to write about me, and they do. You know, I was lucky that I got an NPR spot, like on All Things Considered at some point. Like that was just pure luck.
Big break. But it's also, let's say, I want to qualify that, because pure luck, but you had been playing music for how long at that point?
When that happened, I had...
You started when you were 8.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
So, but trying to really make it as an artist, and I'm using air quotes here.
Yeah. I did have a sort of a, it's kind of a, I guess it is a strategy. It's a serendipity strategy. And the serendipity strategy, sounds ridiculous, is when I was younger and had the time, before I was a mother, I would say yes to everything. I kind of had this philosophy of say yes because I can. Again, because I don't have a machine, I don't have a record label, I don't have a lot of mouths to feed. I say yes because I can, and then see what happens. And that really worked for me, I think, because all those amazing opportunities came from saying yes to crazy things. It was like, say yes to crazy things. Like I wouldn't, not say yes to everything, but I particularly liked crazy things. and an example of that was, I said yes to, these people contacted me via email. They were history buffs and kind of like maker types, and they had they were doing this thing for the 60th anniversary of the Trinity nuclear test, which was the first nuclear bomb.
Wow. And
they were doing, it was called SimNuke. They were going to do a simulation of a nuclear blast out in the desert at 5:25 a.m., whatever time it was, on, I think it's July 16th of that year, to commemorate this anniversary of this nuclear bomb. And they had these big industrial blowers that they use in mines, and they were going to blow diesel fuel in a circle and light it on fire to create a mushroom cloud and do it out in the desert. And they'd been planning this for a couple of years, and they wanted me to play some music right after that moment. Part of it is that one thing about people who do explosive things in the desert is that they might cheer, because it's like, yeah, big explosion, and you don't want to cheer after it's a commemoration of the first nuclear blast, right?
Right.
So this just really felt compelling to me, even though it involved traveling many hours out into the desert, and then staying up all night long, and then somehow doing a concert in the desert with my cello.
Not really a cello environment, right?
Yeah, and it seemed really
and
difficult, and and I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And part of it also was that I had this fascination with nuclear energy and nuclear bombs since I was a teenager, and I took that crazy idea, and I ran with it, and I made a piece of music for the occasion, and then performed it live, right there after the blast, and everybody around me at the time was like, "This is crazy. Why are you doing this? You're not getting paid. It's a lot of time." But then I got there and did this thing, and Jenny Jardin from Boing Boing was there, and she covered it, and then it went to NPR, and that was the first time that my CD immediately went to #1 on iTunes. Was a result of that. Now, that's not to say that's going to always happen when you say yes to crazy things, because I said yes to many other crazy things, but it was always like, that was one of many times when something happened because I did something that was sort of, what is a cello doing here? Right. It was like, I put myself in an unusual place, which then made me stick out, really. That wasn't how I was thinking of it, but saying yes to unusual things was kind of a good serendipitous success strategy. That was sort of what I was doing.
The strategy of serendipity.
Yeah, and it made life interesting, because I always like to be looking forward to something like that. This just makes life fun for me.
Yeah.
That I know 6 months from now I'm gonna do this thing. I'm gonna be playing in Helsinki or whatever. Like that.
In an ice castle in Helsinki.
Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, I can't always say yes to things anymore. And it's actually one of I think, this is sort of the tragedies of getting older, and you realize you don't have time to say yes to everything. Yeah. And so now I can only say yes to occasional crazy things.
less crazy.
Yeah.
Same level of crazy, less volume.
Yeah. And then I think there's a point too where it's like, how can you make your own crazy things instead of being in reactive mode? I think I have actually spent a lot of my career in reaction to waiting for those moments, and then they sort of started creating themselves, and then it's like, no, now I want to create those crazy things. So,
anything crazy you're working on right now?
I'm thinking of some things, but I think I need an assistant first.
I want to commingle three things. One, you talked about, and they're all things you've mentioned before. I want to put them in a little triangle, and then maybe you can react to them. You talked about the passing of your late husband, Jeff. You talked about having a direct relationship with your fans. And as a fan, I observed this, the way that you shared very intimately about that process for you, through music, through writing, and just communication with your, and we haven't talked about that since then. And I'm wondering how, was that architected? Was it a therapy for you? Was it a muse for your music? Was it healing? Was it all those things? How do you think about that? And I just, as an outside observer, and as someone who is an artist who is very connected, we're all very connected to our loved ones. And can you just talk to me about how you managed that process and what it felt like?
Yeah, I didn't think about it at the time. I just did what had to be done, That came from being a caregiver of him and my son, and also telling my audience what was happening. And it's interesting because I didn't blog very much since then, because I feel like that was my medium at the time. I couldn't travel, but I talked about it, and I felt like I needed to talk about it. Cancer is an isolating experience, and we lived in the woods, and so It was just natural. Didn't even occur to me not to write. I remember writing about it on a blog, and I just kept doing it, and it was just sort of, it was very organic and natural. And I think actually, I've never thought about why I did that till you've just asked me that. So, but in a way, it was important that I did because it told my audience what was going on with me, and because I have this connection with them, and then also it opened up a way for people to help me. Whereas if people hadn't known, they wouldn't have been able to help.
Yeah.
And that was huge. I mean, I had a lot of financial worries at that time from medical bills. And also the incredulousness of it. Like, I couldn't believe what I was dealing with on an administrative level with the health insurer and the hospitals and stuff.
Yeah. Maybe we can just have like one little background on that for the people who don't know.
Yeah.
Your insurance rejected his initial emergency hospital stay.
Yeah. And there was, it was like $35,000. Saying, and it has said,
and you have insurance, to be clear.
Yeah, we had insurance, and there was a letter that said, diagnosis cancer, and it said why it wasn't covered. And so the letter was saying that this hospital bill is not covered, and also subsequent things are not covered. And it was just, and I learned then that this was a standard thing that insurance companies would do, and then of course you fight it. But imagine, like, it's so devastating, it was so stressful. And so of course I wrote about it, and I wrote about it. I think I posted a copy of the bill on Twitter.
Yeah.
And within 24 hours, I had a news crew at my house, and the local news came over, and they did this video, which I'm embarrassed to see nowadays because it's kind of, it's very intense. But then the next day, the insurance company called our house and apologized and said that it was a mistake.
Wow.
But I've since learned that that kind of mistake happens every day in America.
Do you believe that it was a mistake?
No, absolutely not. That was not a mistake. The only reason it was a mistake, it's that a news crew came over so that people became aware of it.
So the mistake was that they messed with the wrong woman.
Yeah, and that happens to people every day. And so after that, then it became this thing of just, in a way, it was something for me to hold on to. Like, I could, you can't necessarily do anything about stage 4 cancer, but I could do something about this injustice of the bills. So, it's me trying to do something. And so in a way I see now that I was trying to help something.
Process.
Yeah.
As a mechanism of processing.
I could make this better. I could make this bill go away. That was what I could do. But yeah, the whole 7 months there of just dealing with the billing, and I had this system I had a spreadsheet where I'd map all the bills that came in with what had been paid, what hadn't, what I was disputing. Like, that was a full-time job. And I was just, struggling. And this is where it comes back to the fans, which is that people started donating to us. And I felt bad about it. I was like, there's so many people who really need help. And I'm the breadwinner of the family as the musician. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen next. No, my husband doesn't have life insurance, true. But I still felt like this sense of privilege about it. And it did help because that money allowed me to hire somebody. So I hired like a full-time person who could actually, my son's preschool was half an hour away. And so there was this ordeal of like driving him the opposite direction to preschool and then rushing back to maybe get Jeff to chemotherapy and then rushing back to get him to preschool. And we were in the countryside, so like the chemotherapy was an hour away and the preschool was half of the other. And so what she could do was she could drive, she could pick up medications, because you have to go to the pharmacy like every day sometimes, pick up medications, just do grocery shopping, help with this administrative stuff, entering the bills. Part of her day every day was to spend an hour calling the insurance company and calling the providers. And
wow.
And that all came from fans, including one fan who wrote out of the blue saying, I want to hire you a person. How much money do you think you need?
Wow.
Somebody who I never knew before. So
there's this grace and beauty in the community.
Yeah, so I'm profoundly grateful. It was like some version of crowd surfing, in a way, a horrible version of it, but that's how it felt. And then afterwards, just letting people know what was happening, I think it was important.
Do you feel like that? You also said, I'm going to put a fourth point. I'm going to turn a triangle into a square now, which you talked about having a very limited time on the planet. You mentioned that just through the course of conversation, and that's one filter through which you make decisions. Can I say yes to this? I can't say yes to everything because there's only so much time. Clearly, that had to have an impact on you.
Yeah, I think I always felt that way, though. I think my music is all about that. Like, you know, my music has always been on some level about this aspect that, like, your time is limited. And that was just, it's probably more and reinforced now, but that's probably been very much a constant in my musical history. And it's the source of a lot of songs.
If that is the source for a lot of your songs, was your art a source of processing?
Absolutely.
Did you use music to process?
I mean, my music is an expression of me. It's like some other version of me, like a musical version that's of that moment. So it's like, you know, your entire history in that moment, and it's always shifting and changing. That's why I love live performance. Like, so I feel like my music is an expression of that. And you know, for a while I wasn't able to express anything musically. It was just kind of like too difficult, too painful, too hard, you know, just, and in fact, for the first 2 years, like in 2015 and 2016, the only music I did was commissioned music, because I found that I could make music if it was for someone else's project. So I did 2 full TV scores for 2 series during that time. You know, like,
and they're like
20 episodes of television.
This long, this fast, this high, this tall, this deep, this
and it was
melody.
Still, it was a place where I could still be me, but it could be in service to somebody else's story that was not mine. Like, I did feel like my story had kind of come to a little bit of a stop. So in a way, like that TV work stepped in right at exactly the right moment so that I could make music for some other story. You know? It
was, as an observer, it was to have you writing about what you were processing. And if you're not subscribed to Zoe's email newsletter, you should, even if it's just to know when you're going to be in town. But at that moment, I just remember reading these such powerful words. Were you using all your faculties to process the grief? Was it the writing, the music, the fixing the spreadsheet, the deal? Like, talk to me about.
I'm not sure.
Zoe plus grief.
I'm not even sure I can articulate that. You know, it's a process. It's like, you know, it's something that I'll live with for the rest of my life. So, you know, at times I'm better than others, but I would say that there's a big sense of like needing to keep moving forward. You know, and that's true whether you've had a terrible experience or not. I think it's true for art too. Like, I see this with my art too. Like, if I get something that really works and I just keep doing it over and over again and I'm stuck there, it might be a successful thing, but that's not great to be stuck there either. Everything moves forward. And so this is part of life, you know. I've had an experience that hopefully few will have, but every marriage ends in death or divorce, they say. Somebody just told me, which is dark, but wow. But you know, it's, you know, you process and you move through it. It's not like I am everything that's ever happened to me at any moment. And that's my writing, my music. I'm not writing and blogging as much as I used to. I think that there is a complexity to going through something so intense at this stage of my life, you know, an out-of-time death, as I call it, that is very frightening to other people and that is very hard for other people to understand. And there's so much there to talk about that process that sometimes it's easier for me to just put a little bit of a veil between me and them. And it's it's the first time in my career where I deliberately have been holding things back in a way, to not necessarily tell them everything. And I've definitely struggled with that. Like, how do I like put the veil down in some places while still being my authentic self with my audience?
Yeah.
You know.
How do you make that choice? Is it just a day by day? Is it a
It's
feeling?
It's a day by day, and I have stopped doing the. I've stopped talking about certain aspects of my life.
Yeah.
You know,
just
I will say.
because it's hard?
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel appropriate right now. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel. That doesn't mean I won't always. You know.
Yeah.
It's just I'm not talking about it right now.
I do see time being a huge part
Yeah.
of your journey, songs being about time.
Yeah.
This is who I am right now. I am the sum of all of my things, but
Yeah.
making decisions in the moment.
Very much so. Like, I'm not. There's a lot of things that I was doing 5 years ago that I'm not doing now. That doesn't mean it'll always be that way. And I think this is part of this acceptance thing. You know, it's just accepting what I'm doing right now. This is how it is. You know. I'm going to keep evaluating it and seeing how I can improve incrementally. And I've always been incremental. Like, my music is very incremental too. Like, I'm making little improvements here, little improvements there, little improvements. So, you know, I'm not one of those artists who like quickly does things. It takes me a while.
How long did it, so Snowmelt, you released 4 songs.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to
That
create
took
the
me a
album?
long time because I had a whole album that was almost in the can.
Not the trash can.
No, like the can as in the old like
The old film can.
The old film can.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Isn't that funny? That's like that's an anachronistic thing. Yeah, I had an album in the can that I'd been working on, and there was all these songs that were sort of about like early motherhood and all this stuff. And then after Jeff died, I didn't relate to any of that music at all. I would just listen to it and I was like, nope.
Who is this? Yeah.
Nope. And in a way, like, I don't know if I'll ever revisit those songs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure what I'll do with them. Maybe I'll revisit them later.
Yeah.
Maybe I will pillage them for material, for other material, for other songs.
Cut and paste.
Yeah. But Snowmelt was sort of all things that happened after all that. And it did take me a while because my schedule has changed so much. Like, I can't just work all night anymore.
Yeah.
Like I used to. So, and then I don't have a studio anymore because I sold our house in California and moved to this rental in Vermont where I don't have a studio anymore. I've got a spare bedroom. So there's sonic issues. There was a house being built across the street. You know, it's sort of, it's like, it's creatively a difficult environment to work in.
Kind of like a warehouse in the middle of downtown Seattle.
Yeah.
Windows where we're
Yeah,
sitting right now.
there are constraints.
Yes, yes. Technical constraints.
There are constraints. And so in a way, like, releasing these 4 songs these are my constraints. I can do this right now, and here it is. And one of the songs is, you know, the song called Possible, which is so obviously a song about like the idea that it's possible. There is, you know, it's possible I can make music again. I wasn't totally sure if I could do it. Like, I thought maybe I should, you know, maybe I should go back to tech. Maybe I should. I really had some doubts there about, you know, as a single mom, could I keep going doing this? Was this going to be possible? Is it irresponsible of me? Maybe I should go get a nice job with benefits, you know?
Right.
And then also I didn't know if I could write music creatively. Like, gosh, my whole career existed during my marriage, right? So do I exist as an artist without that, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't, you know, I wasn't sure if I did.
How did you find out?
Well, I definitely did, you know. So
Yeah, but how did you find out?
just by writing a new song, yeah. And so one of the songs there was like a new song that was, and I felt like it's possible. And it happened in a very spontaneous way. It's, you know, a result to like good things happening in my life and meeting new people and just, you know. So it is possible. It's different, though. That's the thing, you know. Like, I'm not the artist that I was before, but that's always been true.
Has that been part of a benefit of bringing your community along as you're changing and they see you changing? So it's not like when it's sort of like, I only listen to the old Nirvana.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
or whatever. I mean, it's like,
Yeah, I have had a couple people say like, "Oh, I really like that, that song you did, and it's off my first album." And they like, "Are you ever going to make anything like that again? Because that was my favorite era of yours." And I was like, "Oh, maybe, but I doubt it."
Because I'm a very different person.
Yeah, exactly. I have a family now, and so it's evolving, and who knows what's next, really.
Arts advocacy for the work that you did around your medical bills and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. You're still doing any of that work, or do you feel like that also closed with that chapter?
I am still doing some of it. I thought that chapter was closed, and then in 2016 I got this out of the blue call to come speak with President Obama. It was at the end of his term. It was October of 2016. And he was having this thing called the Frontiers Conference, and it was kind of like his cakewalk. Like, this is all the technology stuff that I care about, that I've worked on, and it was like a fun thing for him, I think, to do. And I was like, why? Why me? Imposter syndrome, hello. And I told the aide who called me, I said, she was in the Obama administration, and I said, the people who are on this panel you've just described to me are so amazing, and I don't know why you're including me. I said, I'm flattered that you've asked me, but I have to decline because I just don't, I'm not very accomplished. I'm not in the world of healthcare. And I actually said no, I couldn't do it because I was not qualified. and then they said, that's exactly why we want you on the panel. And so to go back to the writing thing, what I learned was that the Obama White House, they had been reading my blog. And apparently my blog was very inspirational, and he saw it as like, this is a reason why the ACA, the Healthcare Act exists, is this thing. And so that was kind of an amazing thing. Like it was an idea that like, whoa, this isn't maybe just about me.
Yeah. Advocating for something bigger than
right.
you. Yeah.
And so since then, I've gotten involved in the Joe Biden's Cancer Moonshot, and I played last year in at the like a summit for the Cancer Moonshot, and this was this thing that, again, it was like right when Obama left office. He said, we're going to put all the resources that we put towards getting a man on the moon to cancer.
Yeah.
And it really,
Bo.
And it really is a groundbreaking initiative because all these different like disciplines to work together, and that's not just medicine. There's like a lot of disciplines, and then the 21st Century Cures Act came out of this, which was this act to kind of, I like to say, hard code the funding into the government so that it couldn't just be taken away by subsequent administrations. To kind of like bake in the funding into the National Institute of Health and to other sectors. And that worked in a lot of ways. And that bill was signed in December of 2016. And so I went to the White House for the signing of the bill.
Amazing.
There's been a few little things. I've done a few other little projects about like patient advocacy and just trying to, it's amazing that like when you go through this process, I was amazed that nobody gives you an exit survey. Like, okay, how was cancer for your family? Can I rate the hospitals and the doctors and the system? Can I talk about what didn't work? Is anybody going to survey me? No, that doesn't happen. And so why doesn't that happen? And that was another idea that came out that this group called Gen Pop, we did a big interview and a sort of a data analysis thing, and the result of that was they said this should come out. There should be some sort of way to evaluate patients and their families afterwards as a policy suggestions for hospitals and institutions. So,
wow.
But again, it's individuals. It's all about individuals. It's about like, how can we make this better for you as an individual? Like, nobody asks the individual like how things are necessarily, what they can do to make it better.
It's a stunning impact that when you start making music, in your case, you start like looking around like, what am I doing here with the president?
Yeah.
But it came from you starting to play the cello when you were 8 years old. And you never really know your path, but you know when you're on it.
Yeah. And that was, again, the power of like an individual telling their story. That you can talk, I love data and I love numbers and all this, but really when you have that information and then you have somebody telling a story that connects it, then it means something to somebody who might get the story across and then might cause something else to happen that eventually might create some change. I don't know. So that does seem related. I feel like all these things are very related. And the copyright stuff feels related too. Just this thing of how can you as an individual create your art and make a living from it? And, I think it's important.
And thank you for being such a guiding light to artists everywhere, for not just the advocacy we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes, but for blazing a path in DIY creator culture, making a living and a life for anybody else that I knew was doing it, artist direct and selling not just merch at their merch table, but you're like having a relationship with your fans is super inspirational, has been for a long time. And I revealed this to you earlier. I don't have to get on a plane right now, so I get to see you play tonight. I can't wait.
Yeah, well, it'll be great to have you there.
What's the best way for people who, well, most of the people I'm sure listening, because you're quite popular these days, they know you, but for the few who don't, what's the best way for people to stay in touch or watch or follow?
I think, and this is true for everything, if you love something, find the source. So if you're interested in my music or you're interested in any other artist, go to their website and join their mailing list. And I have zoekeating.com, I have a mailing list there, and it's just me and the, people who sign up, and I will do my best to protect that information and not give it to Cambridge Analytica or like any other company, you know what I mean? Like it's just keeping that direct thing. So,
ZoeKeating.com, and you're Zoë Keating pretty much everywhere on the internet?
Yeah, Zoë Keating, Zoë Cello.
Zoë Cello, that's right.
Yeah, sometimes people can't remember the Keating part, so just Zoë Cello will also find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
thank
coming
you,
back
Chase.
here for a few years after a hiatus. Can't wait to see you again tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. You're such an inspiration as well, and so thank you.
Appreciate you being on the show. And for y'all, make sure to check out Zoe's music, her website, Advocacy, and stay tuned for another episode, hopefully tomorrow. Thank you.